All right, guys. So, you guys in composition have been studying Greek mythology. You've been researching a lot of the major gods and goddesses that exist in Greek mythology. You've been learning about who they are, how they're related to one another, maybe their powers that they have, and you've been learning kind of like those about the people who make up Greek mythology. Um, but we haven't really been diving deep into the actual myths. We've been learning about the characters of Greek mythology, but we haven't been learning about the actual stories. So today I wanted to share with you one of the myths, and that myth I'm going to tell you today is the myth of Zeus's origin story. So, one thing you need to know about Greek mythology before we even get into Zeus's origin story is that ancient Greek culture, their religion was what is called polytheistic. So, what that means is they believe in many gods. So, poly means many, theistic means gods. So ancient Greeks are polytheistic, meaning they believe in many gods, those gods and goddesses that you have been researching through the web quest. Zeus, our main guy for today, he is the ruler of all of the Greek gods. So while all the Greek gods are pretty powerful and have their own special abilities, Zeus is the most powerful, and he's the leader of all the other gods and goddesses, and essentially the world is what ancient Greeks believed. So, we're going to talk about today how Zeus himself became the leader and how he rose to power. So, an important thing for you guys to remember about this myth I'm about to tell you is that it is derived from ancient Greek culture, the key word there being ancient. So, this culture and these people who really believed these things existed long, long ago, and their histories weren't recorded on paper like our histories are. They never were properly documented. So myths, kind of like fables, how we talked about that earlier in the year, myths were passed down by word of mouth. And we know that when stories are passed down by word of mouth, they tend to change. Kind of like the game telephone. It changes as it's passed down from generation to generation because people forget details or because they add own details of their own. And so over time, the myths change. So there are a lot of different versions of Zeus's origin story that exist out there. I'm not saying that my version is like the correct one, but this is just one version, and there are many, many other versions that exist out there of this same story. So you might have heard a different version before. This is just one version of that myth. Okay, so the story begins with Titans. So you guys know all about the Greek gods and goddesses. You've done a lot of research through the web quest. But before gods and goddesses ruled the world, there was a group of beings called Titans that ruled the world. So Titans came before gods, and they were the leaders of the world. They were the powerful beings that decided the fate of the world, essentially. And there were two main titans. Well, really, one main titan, and his name was Kronos. So sometimes you'll see his name spelled with a C, so like Kronos or Cronus. But for today, we're just going to call him Kronos. So he was the Titan Lord. He was ruler over all the world before Zeus was. He was the ruler, and he was married to a woman named Rhea. So they were Titans, and they were married to each other, and they together ruled the world, and they were in charge. So together, they had 6 kids in total. So I'm going to tell you about the first 5 kids that they had. They had 5 kids named Hestia. They had a daughter named Hestia, or Hestia. They had a son named Hades. Might recognize that name. They had a daughter named Hera. They had a son named Poseidon. And then finally, they had another daughter named Demeter or Demeter. I'm not totally sure how to pronounce that name. I say it Demeter, but I could be totally wrong. Okay, so they had these 5 kids, 3 daughters, and 2 sons. So, what you need to know about Kronos is that he was not a nice guy. So, he was the ruler of the world, but he was very greedy and very prideful. He was super powerful and he did not want anybody to jeopardize his power. And so when he had kids, he was kind of worried about the possibility of these kids rising up one day and threatening his power and threatening to take the throne from him. And so what he did to prevent this. So every time him and his wife Rhea had a kid, as soon as they were born, he would swallow them whole. So the day Hestia was born, he swallowed her whole. The day Hades was born, he swallowed them whole. So on and so forth for the rest of the 5 kids. So I'm going to put an X by all of these 5 kids' names. So you know that while they had these kids, they aren't just like living as one big happy family. They were swallowed by their father. So that should give you an idea of how selfish and greedy Kronos was. He was so greedy and was so worried about his power being threatened that he was willing to swallow his own kids and essentially like take their lives away from them just to make sure that his power wouldn't be threatened. So Kronos isn't the best guy. So they have these first 5 kids and he swallows them and they decide to have another kid. I don't know why Rhea decided to keep having kids with this guy. He doesn't seem like the best guy to me, but whatever. They decide to have another kid, and this kid's name is Zeus. So we got Zeus here. He is the baby brother to all of these 6 who came before him, Zeus. And so this time around, Rhea was like, man, kind of sick of my husband eating all of my kids, as any reasonable mother would be. And so she devised a plan to keep her last son safe. So after she gave birth to Zeus, when she went to present their new baby son to her husband Kronos, instead of presenting their actual baby son to him, she took a pretty big rock and she wrapped the rock in blankets and handed the rock over to Kronos. So Kronos must not have been a smart guy because he fell for it and he took the rock and was like, okay, another kid for me to eat. And so he swallows the rock thinking that it is his baby. But Rhea tricked her husband, and what really happened to Zeus was that with the help of 2 other Titans, their names were Uranus and Gaia, she sent baby Zeus to the island Crete. So while Zeus is away on the island of Crete, he is growing up and he's becoming really powerful. So from our research, we know that Zeus has some special abilities. So he is able to wield lightning bolts. He's able to shapeshift and look like anybody else, and he can also sound like anybody else. So he's pretty powerful and he's growing up and becoming more and more powerful every day. So after he's like learned to master his abilities, he eventually decides that he's going to return to the home of his father, Kronos, and exact revenge on him and get revenge on him for killing or for swallowing whole all of his siblings. So keep in mind that Kronos has no idea that Zeus is alive. He thinks that Zeus is in his belly, because he swallowed the rock that he thought was Zeus. So he doesn't even know Zeus exists. So when Zeus goes to fight Kronos, Zeus kind of has the element of surprise on his hand or on his side. So when he goes to fight Kronos, he successfully frees his brothers and sisters from Kronos's belly. Keep in mind that Hestia, Hades, Hera, Poseidon, Demeter, and Zeus are all immortals. So they weren't truly dead inside of Kronos's belly. They were just simply trapped. So he frees them, and together all of the siblings fight the Titans, and they chop up Kronos and hide him in the depths of Tartarus, which is the deepest, worst part of the underworld. So they defeat Kronos, and thus begins the reign of the gods and goddesses. So it's no longer the Titans in charge, it is the gods and goddesses in charge. So because Zeus is kind of the guy who started all of this, and he was the one who truly freed his brothers and sisters, he is elected to become basically the leader of the Greek gods and goddesses, and he stays the leader um, forever. He's in charge. So that's how Zeus comes into power, and that's how the Greek gods and goddesses come to be. First, there were Titans. Zeus fought the Titan Lord Kronos, his father, and now Zeus reigns along with all the other gods and goddesses.